REWRITTEN! Oh, my stars. Oh, my stars. Oh, my stars. The new fusion was panting, the curly hands on the side of her head passing Stephen to her normal ones. That was too close! She was big enough to hold him in one hand, her head probably reaching twice as tall as the doorframe of the greenhouse where the homeworld warp was. It was nighttime again on Earth. The darkness was an abyss beyond the greenhouse's glass dome. She hugged him tightly, seeming so relieved to have him safe, but the moment that she did, the pain in his gem doubled and he cried out. It hurt to move. Every shift felt like daggers and needles being forced through his skin. Being hugged was, in short, not the most pleasant experience. Careful with him! The new fusion jumped, beginning to set him down gently on the greenhouse's floor. Sorry! Let me see your gem. How bad is it? At first he didn't want to, the pain warning of how fragile he was. But he knew that he would have to move eventually, so he braced himself for the worst and lifted his shirt up enough to see the wound. He winced as he peeked down, seeing plain as day the damage that had been sliced through him. This was the first time he'd ever been cracked. He hoped that it would be the last time, because this felt like piles and piles of awful. His gem's rosy surface was cracked, the slash not deep but still cutting all the way across, covering more area. It felt like it was throbbing, tiny prickles of liquid light trickling from it like blood, the pain so bad that he felt like he'd faint. Not as horrible was whenever it had been ripped out, but this seemed on a different level from that, his whole body knowing the importance of the little pink rock embedded into his skin. The flesh around his gem was cut too from where her icy scabbard had sliced across his underbelly, bleeding pretty badly, but again, not deep enough to spill his guts. It irritated the old scar all around the jewel where his flesh had been ripped whenever it had been pulled out of him. Stephen felt sickened to see it, the starved nausea lurching through him again at the sight, worsened by the pain. The new fusion looked just as horrified. But she said, "It doesn't look like you lost any chips. I'm sure you'll be okay. You can heal it, right?" He hadn't even thought about that. He'd been so distracted by the swirl of action. Thank goodness he's the healer. So Stephen licked his hand and pressed the healing spit into the fracture. For the first time that he can remember, he was healing his own gem. It felt warm and bright, but in a softer and gentler way than using his other powers. It was a little strange, since whenever he used his spit, he always felt a bit of his own energy leave him for the person that he was healing, except this time the energy was just being cycled right back to him rather than to somebody else. It was actually really nice, the pain fading into relief as the crack began to seal itself up, healing over until his gem's surface was smooth and glossy again. He felt his gem's presence zap back into the consciousness inside of his mind, flurried and panicked at what just happened. He was able to calm the glow down before it started up again, promising that they were safe at home. His attention was only brought to his other injury whenever the biggest problem was solved. Most of the fight was some sort of blurry haze, but he distinctly remembered Bluebird slitting his shoulder at the beginning. Sure enough, pain was digging into him through there, too. His jacket sleeve and his shirt's arm beneath that had been torn from it, the blood staining the pink fabric red. He quickly healed his sliced shoulder, the skin molding back together into a little white scar to join the hundreds of others that covered his body from years of fighting gem monsters. After that was over, Stephen lied back down on the floor with an exhausted sigh, his arms over his face. "Is it okay now? Oh no, does it still hurt?" the fusion asked shrilly, as if lying down was an indication of death. "No, it's fine. I'm just tired," Stephen mumbled, not opening his eyes. He felt the various dragging weaknesses returning to him as the adrenaline died down. He was dry and thirsty again, his stomach aching for something to eat, his eyelids heavy with missed sleep. He'd scrambled around way too much today and now had nothing left in him. He felt like a wrung-out towel. Thanks to Jasper, it's been almost a week since he'd eaten a proper meal or slept in a real bed, and thanks to the swirl of disaster that went down after he got home, 2 days straight since either of those needs had been fulfilled at all. He had to rest. He wasn't going to be able to go on like this forever. Stephen sighed, trying not to let himself drift off again. "All right, okay, stay together. What do we do? How do we fix this?" He couldn't tell his family, for a million different reasons. They'd worry for him, they'd get hurt, then they'd hate him for it. He was so glad that Connie wasn't involved in this, at the very least. She always ended up being put in danger whenever big gem stuff happens to him, but for now, she was probably asleep at her house, none the wiser to what was happening to him. At least she was safe. He intended to make everyone else safe, too. He'd have to confront the crystal gems eventually, as well as his dad, who were all probably looking for him somewhere. He'd have to think of a lot of very good lies, and fast. How much time did he have to string up a harmless, non-suspicious story, and how could he stop other people from contradicting it? They probably weren't expecting him to be home again, if they'd even figured out that he'd gone to Homeworld. He still had some time, he was still a few steps ahead. But what should he do with those steps? That was where his ideas ran dry. Spinel and Volleyball were already too exposed to this to get out of harm's way. They, as well as the Diamonds, were the only people who knew about Jasper. It felt wrong to force them to keep that secret, but was there any other way to protect the rest of his family? But what did they need protection from? Himself? Shouldn't they know how dangerous he is? It was only fair. Was he just trying to get out of trouble? Was he more villainous than he realized? If he really was villainous, he should tell the truth so they can contain him properly before he hurts someone else. But I didn't want to shatter her, a part of his mind bleated feebly. I didn't know that it would kill her. She told me she could take it. I wouldn't have done it on purpose. Surely I wouldn't have. Maybe Spinel and Volleyball could help? But with what? Forcing him to confess? Could he ask for their opinions? Spinel and Volleyball. Wait. His mind seemed like it was slowly moving from one problem to the next, one step at a time, working its way up to normality again. And then he realized exactly who he was talking to. Wait, you guys fused? Stephen yelped, sitting up abruptly, the movement making his head spin. The new pink fusion looked confused, glancing around. What? Who did? You! He pointed at her. Spinel and Volleyball! It was only then that the fusion seemed to notice who they were. She looked down at herself, letting out a surprised yelp and falling backwards. Whoa! Wait, what? She stammered, staring around at her extra limbs, examining her taller form, poking at her 2 gems. We did. I didn't even notice. How did you not notice? Stephen almost laughed. I was kind of more worried about saving you, the new fusion explained. I guess that's what brought them together. She suddenly lunged forwards, as if unable to resist any longer, wrapping all 4 of her arms around him in a warm embrace while she yelled, all in a rush. Spinel and Volleyball won't say it, but I will. You're like my big brother, and I don't know what I would do if I lost you, Stephen. I couldn't just sit there and watch you get beaten up. I hadn't been more scared in my life. Wow, Stephen stammered, almost overwhelmed by their thanks. Thank you. When the fusion let him go, Stephen asked them, So, what do you think your name is? She paused for a moment, watching her 2 gems as she pondered that idea. Kunzite, she replied. Kunzite, Stephen repeated. Well, thank you, Kunzite, for literally saving my life. Of course, she smiled cheekily, beaming down at him. But the wonder of the new fusion flaked away faster than normal. Stephen still had to deal with what just happened, and what he caused. Oh, no, he breathed, feeling like the floor was being pulled out from under him. I cracked White Diamond, then Bluebird, and then Rebellion. The air of excitement was gone now, replaced with nothing but the tingling fear of what was to come. She hit your gem, Kunzite murmured. Bluebird tried to shatter you. Stephen only realized that now. His hand brushed up against the pink jewel, feeling its upset, shaken emotions right alongside his. This was the first time that it had been rendered useless to defend him, and it was terrified of that. He could feel its hold tighten over him, sending a silent promise to never, ever let that happen again. But it was okay. He was a diamond. No gem was tougher. He survived. Barely, a voice whispered in the back of his head. It's going to be okay, Kunzite began slowly. We're safe here. We broke the homeworld warp. You healed White. She'll be reforming in a few hours, but... She fell silent, trying to meet Stephen's gaze, her own looking full of worry. Are you okay? She asked. He knew that she wasn't talking about the injuries this time. Yes, he replied quickly. Are you sure? Do you still need help with your powers? Kunzite trailed off. No, it's fine, really, Stephen insisted. That's not as important as... He wasn't able to find the right words. He was distracted by the pains that were filling him up, dragging him down like chains. He had a very upset stomach right now, cramped up with dizzying nausea, aching starvation, and some other seriously offended feeling about how he was daring to treat it this way. His throat and his mouth felt like dry sandpaper, making it hard to swallow and telling him that he'd used up the last of his healing spit on himself, the thirst pulling at him harder and harder to demand the materials to make more of the essence. His eyes and his head felt like they were swollen lumps from fatigue, prickling angrily and jabbing at him with vengeful waves of headaches, heavy and weighted like he was being hit by a giant mallet. His vision was swimming with shadowy bits as he struggled to focus the sliding images, his thoughts staggering around to try and stay in formation, not making any sense. His whole body pretty much hated him right now, and its way to protest his abusive reign was to punish him with lots and lots of exhausting pain. He tried to fight it off, pushing himself off of the floor, but his legs refused to act, and the next thing that I knew, Kunzite had caught him with her big hand. Whoa, careful, she yelped, setting him down gently where he was before. Stephen, I really think you should take a break. You're not looking too good. Alarm shot through him at that suggestion. What? No, I'm fine. I just tripped. He tried, but Kunzite sighed in exasperation and said, No, Stephen, you're exhausted. Humans need food, water, and sleep to recover. I honestly shouldn't have to be telling you this, seeing as you're the half-human here. Stephen shook his head again, which didn't help the headache at all, and said, But I don't have any time for that. What about Bluebird and White Diamond and Homeworld? I have to do something. What if they... Stephen, you can't help any of that if you collapse. We're safe on Earth. Yellow and Blue can take care of it. It's what they wanted us to do, remember? Hide here until they sort it out, Kunzite said, picking him up with one hand and hoisting him up onto her shoulder, one of her curly ponytail hands holding him there tightly. Here, I can carry you to your house so we can calm down. He hated how right she was. He wanted to think of a plan, but he couldn't think of anything except for his bed. His thoughts were all gummed up like sticky gears. He had no idea where to even start fixing what he'd left behind on Homeworld. Any time he'd gain a moment of clarity, his banged-up body would shriek, Hungry, thirsty, tired, pain, frick you! And he'd struggle not to pass out right where he was. Stephen felt like he was being weak for all of this. He gets back from Homeworld after arguing and nearly suffocating to death, almost shattering 2 more people, getting chased by a rebellion of gems who want to kill him, and then almost dying again, and he was just supposed to eat a snack and take a nap? Still, no matter how much he hated the idea of sitting still, his body was demanding for him to listen to her. All right, fine, he finally breathed, closing his eyes and letting his head lean back against the side of her face, next to her ear. You didn't have a choice in that, buddy, Kunzite said, making sure that he was secure in her pigtail arms loop. Both of them exited the greenhouse, leaving the broken Homeworld warp in pieces behind them.